Welcome. Thanks everyone for joining. I know we've got a few more attendees dropping in. Um, Very excited to share 5 tips for successful cloud migrations today. I'm Lee Easton. I am founder and president of Identify, and I would not do justice, but I want to kick it over to Marty Miracle for an intro, and then Randy from there.
Hello, yeah, Marty Miracle with Sutton Bank. I'm a CISO and also take on the responsibilities of Chief Technology Officer. So it's my job to have a strategy for what we're going to use with technology going forward.
Great to have you, Marty. And Randy, Mr. Snowflake.
Yep. I'm Randy Rod. I'm a account executive supporting some of our financial services customers that are out of Ohio and Michigan. Look forward to having a good conversation here on both the success of Sutton Bank migrating to Snowflake, as well as in general the tips and tricks and ideas that you should come up with as you're looking for similar projects.
Awesome. Well, guys, thanks for joining me today. This is our first webinar produced by Identify. So we're very excited. You guys are our first featured guests. For everybody else that has joined the call, we're getting started. So we do have an open Q&A at the end of our session today. We're going to go about 30 minutes. We're going to kind of share this as a narrative, more of a storytelling experience today to give the 5 tips for these cloud migrations. So 20 to 30 minutes, and then we want to open it up. So as we go today, if you guys move your mouse towards the bottom of the Zoom, you've got a Q&A button with a little question mark. So we want to try and guide our questions there. If you guys have questions throughout, just pull that up, drop your question in. And then at the end, once we kind of wrap up, we'll open up the panel for discussion and for questions. So feel free to use the chat as well. Would love to hear where some of you guys are from. So drop your name, drop your location maybe. And yeah, let's jump over to our kickoff slide here. And I will add, so we are recording today too. So if you guys maybe have some friends that wanted to come and couldn't make it, this link will be sent out afterwards and you guys can record. So a little bit about Identify. So Identify is based out of Tulsa, Oklahoma. We have a strong mission to support community banks. So we exist to take banks into a world without batch files and data silos. Though we're based in Tulsa, we have team members all over the US and we work with banks all over the US. Been along here. Quick agenda. So here's what we're going to hit today, guys. I want to give a quick current landscape. So this is just an industry topical discussion that kind of sets the stage for the 5 tips that we want to share. I'm going to tell you exactly what we're going to go over today. So we're going to talk through assessing your current position if you're going to move to cloud, how to validate and scale your data strategy, how to choose the right partner, and then also a focus, especially since we are talking to Marty, who is CISO and CTO for a bank. So why compliance first approach is very important. Compliance first is your best defense. And then we will kind of wrap things up on how to build for a post-migration success. So what does that look like after everything is done? All right, so talking about the current landscape, what we've recognized over the last few years at Identify is that there is a villain in the industry. The villain lives within data silos. We know that our banks that we work with have a very common symptom, very common problem. And that problem is that they are on legacy tools and technologies. These systems exist and they've existed for decades, but they tend to lock data up into silos. And so the lack of access and the lack of usability for that data makes it very hard for a bank or an FI or even a credit union to become nimble, to grow, and to meet some of the needs of their customers. So this has caused an interesting evolution in the last 10, 15 years. We have companies like Chime and even Cash App spinning up. And those companies have been able to scale and move quickly, building digital products for consumers, and now there's commercial products for businesses. that ultimately create the financial tools that people want and that businesses want. It's just been challenging for banks to do that because all their data is locked up in some sort of legacy system. This is why we wanted to bring both Marty and Randy on today, is because we have a story for you to tell you how a bank has recognized that and overcome that. So our solution is the modern cloud solution. We leverage tools and technology in the cloud, help banks ultimately scale and grow and meet those demanding needs. Okay, so the very first tip out of the five, guys, before you do anything, you have to actually identify the problem. So in our case, and like I mentioned, we are familiar with banks that have these legacy systems, but I'm going to kick it over to Rand, or to, sorry, not Randy, but Marty. Marty, let's hear from you and your perspective on maybe the problem that you were specifically facing when you and I met, let's say, a couple years ago.
Certainly. So the problem we were facing is we had a lot of disparate data. You think of it as program transaction-based data, some demographic data, quite a lot of it that we're using a proprietary closed system for transforming that data. So we needed to normalize it. Comes a lot of sources. It's very disparate. I called it chaos at first. And then we're using old tools to transform that data into something usable. Things like additional reporting, transaction monitoring, things like that. Over time, we found that not only was that system difficult to use, it was very using old technology. Finding the right skill set to leverage it was becoming more and more difficult. It's becoming more and more expensive because it's hardware based. So we weren't really able to get the data out of it that we needed. We weren't able to validate it the way that we should or trust the integrity of it. And it began to show up in real business problems. So it became clear to me as one of my roles is to make sure that the business has all the technology they need to do their job, that we needed a different solution. So what I decided is it was time to free the data. And that's what I called the initiative. Is we need to get better control, get some control over our data, have it trustworthy, be able to validate it, be able to use it, and know that it was trustworthy when we were using it. So that challenge then became, how do we actually do this a different way? And that's what brought me to Identify.
And Marty, I'm curious, what was your maybe a driving, use case that you couldn't get to because of the problem, because of the, access challenges you were facing?
Yeah, sure. One of the problems was, again, not being able to validate the data. So we would be able to want to use that data to support transaction monitoring, additional reporting on it, and exporting the data out of that closed system was impossible. You had to have a very special skill set, and then you had to be able to export that data using that skill set that we simply didn't have. And it also made it next to impossible for us to validate that data the way that we needed to. So we were starting to, trying to had processes around using this data that we knew were broken or less trustworthy than they should be. It also became a money problem in the fact that we were trying to add new hardware to it to do this all the time. We were quickly outgrowing that, and adding more hardware to it often was just prohibitively expensive. So there had to be a better way of getting control over this data. And so I began thinking that maybe the way to do it is just learn to transform the data ourselves, and then find a cloud-based system or another system that would allow us the flexibility to be able to grow.
Exactly. Yeah, that's so Marty, this is what we discussed early on. I think if I were to summarize the two problems you brought to me was, hey, I think we're spending too much money on our existing hardware, but we're also not able to really utilize it the way that we need to grow and scale. And just for context, everyone on the call that's maybe seeing or hearing of Sutton Bank for the first time, this is a bank out of Attica, Ohio, relatively small town in Ohio, but they have invested in a series of different partnerships with some pretty common financial brands, so consumer products, commercial products that might do card issuing. And there's a complexity of those relationships. We've listed some logos here on the screen. Most of these logos are some of the kind of the in-between, call them, data partners, maybe even data sources that Marty and I had to kind of review in the early stages of the problem. We had a lot of different data sources that need to be mapped together and normalized together. And so we knew that this was going to be big. And I think this is a good segue into the tip for number two. We were trying to figure out, okay, how do we slice this down into something small um, that the bank could really agree on? So I'm going to kick it back to you, Marty. Like,
Sure.
walk me through how we even got started.
Yeah, my idea was to try to figure out at an initial step whether we could just transform our own data. Just look that simple. We get data, disparate data from a lot of different sources, and relying on someone else to transform or normalize that data was one of the problems. So I said, well, maybe we can just see if there's a way to just transform it ourselves. So I got in contact with Lee. I said, look, here's my idea is let's just transform, let's do the basics. We have a data standard we want to map it to. Let's see if we can map one of these data sources to this standard, see what the lift is. I then went and, without giving a whole lot of information, convinced my boss to give me some money to do it without really telling what all it was about, because I didn't really want to get people's hopes up that we could replace this old legacy system that we had. So we started a POC where we just thought whether we could take this data and transform it ourselves into a format that was standardized, usable. Um, that was the first phase of it. And when we realized we could do that, the next phase was, well, we need a platform for doing this. I don't want to go and buy, millions of dollars worth of hardware again. Let's see if there's a cloud-based solution for this. So after reviewing options, we'll go through a lot of the reasons why we chose Snowflake later on. But I said, well, let's try to replicate our production system on a small scale inside of Snowflake. Not only use it for data storage, but also using it to transform the data itself. Think of it as the computing platform part. So we took our end-to-end process. An end-to-end process is kind of normalized and transform it into a data set that we can do additional reporting on with standardized tools. Um, and then create files that we need to go to a transaction monitoring system. That was kind of our use case. And so on a small scale, we then did a proof of concept where we replicated that as well. And once that was successful, we realized not only can we transform the data, we can also transform into all the different formats that we need. And we had a platform that allowed me to do that without having to buy a lot of hardware. Then the next part was, okay, this actually works. And let's turn it into a real project where we actually completely replicate the production system we had, completely inside of Snowflake end to end. And that's what took us about, I don't know, maybe a year or maybe a little less than a year from beginning to end to actually replicate a complete production system inside of Snowflake.
Yeah. Yeah. I think so. The kicker here was Marty and I needed to figure out what we could pull off in like a 30-day window. And so for those that have, maybe joined the call and are curious about how to conduct a POC, I think we had to determine what could we accomplish in 30 days. There was a couple reasons for this strategy, Marty. I think one, I think we knew that we had a trial period with Snowflake.
Some of
So
them
there
weren't
there
driven by
was
that. That's true.
there was something there where we're like, all right, can we, in a way can we be scrappy? Can we bootstrap some of this? And Randy, I know you weren't there at the time, but Rex Stevens, awesome guy. He was very helpful. And he was like, yeah, I think we can, let's work on a trial together. And in that trial, this was really Marty's idea, but he said, I think we should take our largest data set first. He's like, if we can bring in one data source, one of the call it the 80/20 principle. If we can bring in a good majority of volume, land it, attempt to normalize it, and validate that that works, then the rest should roll out. And so that was the approach. So what I would encourage others as you look at conducting a POC, you know, maybe think about what your options are to be scrappy. What can you get away with within that licensing window, even too. But on top of that, I think Marty, what I might ask you is like, looking back, do you feel like we made the right decisions for that POC? Would you have done a smaller data source to sample first? Like, would you change anything?
No, I wouldn't change anything. Even having learned a lot through the whole process, I think whether through blind luck or wisdom, we hit upon the right way to do this for us. It worked well at Sutton because of how we're structured, and I do have the ability to go to the right people and say, I just want to try this. Here's the upside, here's the downside, um, and then go do it. Um, to try to do a smaller data source really would not have given us the breadth of understanding that we needed to know that we could really pull this off or not. We would have to do another step where we actually took the larger data set afterwards. So it didn't really make a lot of sense for us to do it that way. At that point in time, though, Identify did understand the data set, and I was able to bring in our payments data team under Mrs. Sherman and John Devlin to participate as well. So we had the expertise to understand that data set and then create the larger projects to pull it off.
Yeah. In a way, that was kind of a dating period for us too. So, because this is a big commitment for any bank of any size to bring on a vendor and implement a cloud solution, which I would say the trust of cloud solutions has grown over the last few years. But, this was a couple of years ago now, and things were still kind of teeter-tottering. Do we trust the cloud? Which I think might segue
Yeah,
us into our third
yeah.
point of, yeah, go
Let me
ahead.
integrate something that you brought up a good point here, especially if we have folks on here from smaller community banks. This was the first time we ever used the cloud for anything of substance at Sutton. We had kind of been we want to own it, touch it, feel it, put our hands on it kind of place for 150 something years. So part of this proof of concept too was introducing Sutton to the idea of having this kind of data in the cloud and what the capabilities of that platform were. And thankfully, Snowflake especially was a great partner in helping us all become comfortable with doing this.
Yeah, yeah. And that's where I think we can go to step three, because part of the dating period was to find the right cloud provider. And I had actually been seeking an opportunity to leverage Snowflake. Um, Internal to the Identify team, we had been talking about its potential usefulness across some of the existing clients we were working with, but we hadn't really been able to unlock its true horsepower. I'll just put it that way. Um, so this was a good opportunity for us to, in our own way, date with Snowflake too. And I think Marty would agree. This was, I think he and I kind of came to this conclusion separately, but then discussed it and agreed. So I want to kick it over to you, Randy. When we approached Snowflake, out of the gate, it seemed like you guys were very prepared and easy to work with. But just walk us through, the process, how easy this is for even just a small community bank to get started on their own, and what things they need to look at or sign or, get started.
Yeah, and to take a step back too on your proof of concept, I think your approach there of taking your largest and your most complex environment or tables to start with is a great way to really kick the tires in the sense of you understand that if you have a 10 meg file or 10 meg table, right, that can run locally on your iPhone most likely. But if you have some larger environments out there, that's where really, a cloud platform really shines. So I think that approach was really strong. And I think as you're looking at this and saying, okay, how do I then take that and actually work with Snowflake and someone like Identify to help drive that proof of concept into reality and share it is there's a few different things there. I think as you had mentioned, Lee, right, to start off, you can start off with a Snowflake account. Generally, we'll give you if you go onto snowflake.com, you can start with an evaluation. You'll get $400 in free credits. Um, Generally, your account team should probably reach out to you as well. Depending on what you're trying to accomplish, they can seek approvals to possibly extend that or add some additional credits to make sure that you are testing it appropriately. Um, and I think normally this is a great time to really look at not only through the proof of concept phase and what your measure for success is on this. This is where it's great to also, to your point, Lee, to start dating a little bit on what's that implementation potentially going to look like for a new data platform, whether it's Snowflake or another data platform that's out there. Because you want to understand how are we actually going to drive this to success. When you look at, if you're currently on an on-premise environment, right, you're going to have support and maintenance costs between both the software and the hardware layer there. So let's make sure that we can make a successful migration by the time that those contract end dates are there. So I think it's a really good to have like a three-legged stool there approach, have the customer, have the partner, and have the cloud data provider out there as well. And Snowflake, we can often recommend someone that might suit you quite well. So I think that's, when you're looking at where do you want to start from evaluating a cloud solution, that's generally the approach that I like with a lot of my customers. When it comes to the actual cloud service provider, so whether that's Google, Microsoft, or AWS, um,
Hmm.
I think this is where it's probably a little bit different for maybe for Sutton than it is for some of our other customers that already have a cloud presence. Um, with our customers that already have a cloud presence, Snowflake really wants to bring the compute to the data. So generally, we're going to recommend be in the environment that the majority of your applications are running in today. With Snowflake, it's very easy to do cross-cloud and cross-region replication. So if you are in multiple regions, whether that's for business continuity and failover, or because maybe you are serving customers in the West Coast and East Coast and want to bifurcate those environments, it's quite easy with Snowflake. But I
Yeah.
really pick where you are. Sorry, go ahead, Lee.
But well, it's good to hear you say that because we talked to some other banks out there, and part of the conversation, I think now, maybe not a few years ago, is they've maybe made some investments with their Microsoft licensing, and they've expanded already into maybe even Azure DevOps or some sort of Azure SQL environment. So it's good to hear you say that it is easy to kind of bring Snowflake to whatever they're already using.
I think too, historically speaking, if you looked at Snowflake, roughly 80% of our customers are on AWS, but maybe 75%, and then a good chunk of them are Azure, and then finally Google. Historically, we have kind of rolled out cloud provider by cloud provider as far as features go, starting with AWS. Over the course of the last year to 18 months, we've really been striving to have parity across all the cloud providers. So that's something too that you can talk to your account team on and what makes the most sense for you.
Got it. Um, okay. Well, I want to segue us more towards the kind of the next tip here. So tip 4 is about compliance. And Marty wears a couple hats at Sutton Bank. So Chief Information Security Officer and Chief Technology Officer. So Marty, give us a little bit of insight, maybe from each hat, each perspective.
Sure.
Because you had some concerns early on of just like, okay, this is a lot of sensitive data going to the cloud.
Yes, we are in a heavily regulated environment, about as heavily regulated as you can get, especially when it comes to the data. So as I looked at moving this system to the cloud, I had to keep in mind that security, at the first time we would be doing it as well. So security was incredibly important, as you can imagine. So first part was understanding how well Snowflake supported our security needs, our ability to do access management, data governance, data encryption, those kinds of things, how well the platform supported it. Um, and Snowflake was very helpful in helping us understand that. So we had a high level of confidence that we could secure it the way that we needed to based on our regulatory requirements and our own internal standards. At that point in time, I took my CISO hat off and I made sure that our information security team was involved in this. We had a security plan from the start, and so they had they had the responsibility of making sure that all the requirements were met and implemented before we went live. And so we were a teamwork working together on that. And the main point here is we are heavily regulated. We didn't have any choice but to secure it to best practices and to the regulatory standards. And as a platform, Snowflake was very capable in helping us do that. It also is very our ability to use third parties to help us audit the system, to do penetration testing on AWS and the supporting Snowflake system is very well supported. So we have great confidence that the security system meets the needs that we have. So it was kind of a win-win being able to support what I need to do from an information security side and also be able to deliver the technology that the business needed to get the job done. Was really just, that met both needs in one.
What was that conversation like with the rest of the board of the bank? Maybe some that don't spend a lot of time looking at technology.
Initially, of course, going to the cloud was a big deal to them. I think part of that was why the proof of concepts were so important. I was able to demonstrate this can happen this way, that we shouldn't be afraid of it, and then be able to show them that, hey, we need to secure it. Here's all the things we need to do to secure it. And Snowflake supports that. and our internal teams understand that. And so we were able to build it in from the beginning. There was a security plan from start. There were active representatives from InfoSec and security operations in the planning meetings and the project execution teams. At any point in time, they could have stopped us if there was something that we weren't able to deliver, and that made the board very comfortable with it as well. We went with the next step of once implemented to engage third parties to help make sure we've implemented security the right way, and there hasn't been any doubt from our third party assessors and internally that Snowflake is the right platform to help us secure it the way that we need to do.
Awesome. Yeah, that's good input for I think others on the call. It's just the key to this tip. Tip number 4 here is lead with security, lead with compliance. And Randy, it seems like Snowflake has also made that a big part of their messaging. I'm sure you would agree.
Yeah, I think especially in the highly regulated worlds, right? Everything from ensuring data is always encrypted, to robust role-based access control and data masking and obfuscation to ensure only the right people can see the right level of data, is certainly a key aspect to that. And then, as Marty had said, right, integrating with your third party, with your other security tools that are out there, whether that's for MFA and single sign-on to your monitoring tools, things of that nature, right? It's really want to make sure you have an end-to-end security and compliant framework there.
Beautiful. Okay, well, guys, I'm going to shift us to tip 5 because now we're at that nirvana state. And so, one thing that Identify focuses on most is making the data useful. That is our core business. We realize that there might be siloed systems, but also we don't trust all the data that we receive. We knew this going into the relationship with Sutton Bank, and I also believe this was a spearhead as a part of the mission that we wanted to accomplish with Sutton Bank is let's leverage some of Identify's skill sets around data quality, data improvement, so that we can activate it. So Marty, tell us what Nirvana looks like today now that we are post migration. What are some things that we can streamline? What would be maybe the first thing as a tip, the first thing that you would recommend others do with their data once they have it all in Snowflake?
Well, automation was probably the thing that impressed me the most. I think we needed the most. Well, data validation probably as well. But we'll just start with automation. So we have a system now that when the data comes, it lands in securely into AWS. It's moved directly into Snowflake, where it is then transformed into all the different formats that we need. All this happens automatically with very little intervention. So does the data validation side for the most part. So it actually does the whole job. With our old system used to take hours, sometimes as much as a day, to do the same levels of transformation. Snowflake's able to do it in a matter of minutes, which increased efficiency, as you can guess, quite a lot. So now we have an automated system that has the right level of data validation in it as well. Which really just the point being is now I have, when I wanted to free the data, and now the data's been freed. We can do anything we need to do from a business perspective. You can hook any tool, a business intelligence tool on top of this to do any querying you want. It's a kind of a standardized skill set that's needed to maintain it. There's nothing unique, fancy, hard to get skill sets to run it. And it does it a lot more efficiently, more cost effective, faster and more cost effective than any system I could have built on hardware itself. So the tangible benefits to us are speed. We trust the data a lot more, and it's less money to do the same job, which frees us up in a lot of areas. And also, and I wish, Lisa Sherman as part of our team's data team, who's regularly uses the system, and her team more than anyone, will tell you how they have confidence in the data, where they now know that they need to get information out of it, they can, that they understand the data that's in there, understand that it's trustworthy. And so when people come to us with a business problem that needs to be solved and it involves in this data set, we have great confidence that we're delivering quality to them.
I love it. And this is you're preaching to the choir here. Our primary mission, we really want to see data become useful. And a lot of our users early on are just not extremely confident that all the data they're receiving
Yeah,
from these vendors or these third parties or even these
yeah,
systems come in a useful format. Um, I will say, I think that, I know you hit data validation. I think that's such an important thing for an industry that's regulated. There's a lot of different legacy tools out there. When I think of payments in the business that you guys are in, there's processors out there that are, receiving data from the networks, and then they do stuff with the data, and then they ship the data to you from the network combined with data that they've brought in as well. You know, being able to maybe validate that now with a source file, versus beforehand and just trusting what they're giving you is correct. That's big.
it is big, and it was a problem that our legacy system, our examiners were pushing me very much to try to validate that system deeper, better. And I looked them in the face and said, I can't, and I'm going to solve the problem with this system here. And they gave us time to actually do that. And then when we demonstrated the system actually does have a little data validation that is required and needed, they were very happy to hear that.
Good. Good.
Marty,
Well, there we go. Yeah, Randy, go ahead.
yeah, from talking to some of my other customers as well, and I'm curious your experience here, but when they've adopted Snowflake from some legacy on-premise environments, there's a bit of a flywheel effect. Your end customers, your end users, now they had trust in their data and they had a lot
Yeah,
more access to data. And ultimately that created maybe a good problem to have as they were asking for more, and continuing, and the data team was able to deliver quicker. I'm curious
yeah.
what that looks like in
It,
your environment now.
it works exactly that way. Once we have a data source that we know we can trust and we can, a lot more easily get the data out of, then that allows us to solve more business problems. Even if it wasn't just on the payments data team, reconciling information coming in from that perspective. If the business needed something, accounting needs something, right? They can come to our BA team and they'll work with the payments data team to design a reporting solution or gather the information directly out of the system that we created. It supports our BSA and compliance teams as well for things that our transaction monitoring systems don't do well or we need additional validation on. We can build those types of reporting and information gathering in this tool itself because we understand the data is trustworthy, and it's a very efficient system. And again, the tools we put on top of it for your basic data visualization are easily integrated with it as well. So it definitely, and that's how I envisioned it when I first started this. I envisioned this as a system where every part of the bank and every data source that we may have could eventually flow into here. And if done the same way we did the payments data side, the data would remain accessible, valid, trustworthy, and allow us to solve a lot more business problems. And it's worked out exactly that way. We probably have a wish list a mile long of folks who need problems solved that this infrastructure will help us solve that I could not do before, couldn't do easily.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, now you guys have done it.
Yeah,
Well,
it's
listen,
rare to
guys,
have
this is
something that you envision in your head, and say, I think this is going to work this way, to actually go through an implementation where it works exactly the way that I envisioned it would work.
that's right. That's
Probably
right.
even
And
better.
I would say it has outperformed our expectations.
Agreed.
Okay. I know we are a little bit past time just on the conversation, which is fine. I do want to make sure we have time for some Q&A. So I'm going to hit a quick little recap, guys. So we did discuss the problem here that we are seeing in the industry that Identify is focused on solving. But most importantly, we wanted to provide our audience today with 5 tips, working on a cloud migration. So I think we're seeing, so identify the problem, conduct a proof of concept, find your ideal cloud partner, cloud provider, prioritize compliance. It's a really big one. And then streamline post migration. So come to the table with a proof of concept, use the right partner, make sure you're focused on the compliance aspect of that proof of concept. And then when you streamline post migration, make sure there is some sort of tangible deliverable that you're aiming to achieve. And that is what we did. And I ultimately think that has led us to success. So, Marty, Randy, thank you guys both for your time. I know we might have some Q&A. So I'm going to pop open our questions box here. And I'm just going to run these here and see if we have any answers. And by the way, guys, feel free to pull open your Q&A box if you're still attending, drop some questions, and we've got about 24 minutes left and we can answer some questions here. So is there anything that pops out? So we have one question. Alan Smith looks like he is with Mercantile Bank out of Grand Rapids, 6 billion in assets. He was asking, what is the bank core system vendor and the
Sure.
primary application?
Sure. Okay. I'll tackle that. Internally, we have two sides. Well, it's one bank, but we have two sides: the community banking or normal banking side. Then we have the payments side, which supports some of the larger payments-based programs you have out there. The first problem we solved was in the payments data side. We had a system. It wasn't a banking system. It was strictly a data transformation system that it transformed the data and then made it available in the different formats we needed, and then would go feed other systems to do whatever it needed to do, including some ACH functions. Our first goal was to replace that system. When it comes to our core community banking side, the core banking side, we use Fiserv. It's an internally hosted system, and we are able to bring the data over from it, where it's something we're just beginning, normalize and transform it inside of Snowflake as well. We should be able to do that quite easily once it's mapped, and then make that data available to solve business problems, just like we did on the payments data side of things. So the concept works exactly the same. If you have a banking system like Fiserv or one of those, and you want to free that data, like I did, to do additional things with or have data, whatever business problem you want to solve with it, the same process works. You do a POC where you map the data over, bring it over, set up in this environment, let it transform, and then hook whatever tools you want to on top of it. It's really independent. There may be some more complexities based on the data set that comes out of there, but in the end, it's just extracting, transforming, loading, or extracting, loading, and transforming data.
And I think part of Alan's question here too is, we did not talk much about Sutton's traditional banking business.
Right.
So, FIS, Fiserv, Jack Henry are very common. Maybe share, can you share much about Sutton's core banking, and is there plans for
Sure.
leveraging some core banking data within Snowflake?
There's plans. Again, it's a Fiserv environment. We're mainly a commercial and agricultural bank on the community side with a small footprint here in kind of north central Ohio. If you look us up, I say we jokingly look like an 8-branch farmers bank in the middle of nowhere, but we have this secret little side business that's the payment side. But we're very active and very much supporting the community banking side of things. So I have a list of business problems that I just went over with my boss today that will involve us bringing the data over from our core banking side of things, normalizing it in this Snowflake environment, and to do additional reporting and maybe different applications to solve business problems there. So we're certainly ready to tackle it. We do solve some of the problems there on the community banking side with data, with some transformations inside of Snowflake yet, but it's not to the same level that we use it for the payment side of things. That was just the initial business problem I had.
And I might even add too, for those that are Fiserv customers, so banks that are leveraging Fiserv cores like a Premier or DNA. Snowflake has done a lot of work with Fiserv. Fiserv happens to be, I think, one of the largest customers of Snowflake. There are a lot of initiatives around accessibility to core data through Snowflake. So Snowflake has a feature called the data share. I think Fiserv is packaging that as their own solution called Data Compass, but it's still early in development. There's still some opportunities there, but I expect to see more of these legacy core platforms build features like that. I think they're going to have to, as they have competition building infrastructure around APIs as a core. So I expect to see more Snowflake involvement.
I would say, and this may be a little bit on the naive side, but I would venture to say that if you have the right internal skill set that understands that data, or if you have the right partner and right environment, you don't have to wait on the vendor itself to create anything from there. It's a data extract, transform, and load that you can actually manage yourself. if you have a business need now. So I don't think you have to wait on them. They may end up making
That's a
it
good point.
easier or better,
Yeah.
but I didn't wait for our other partner to tell me, hey, we can move this data over to Snowflake for you. I just did it myself, and I think it'll work the exact same way on from whatever platform if you have the right skill set or partners to help you. And I think
Very
Lee's
good
been a
point.
little. This isn't a plug lease company, but I think one of the things we missed, we said choose the right cloud platform. Choosing the right partners for the other things that you don't have the skill set to do is equally important as well. And through our POC approach, we learned very quickly that we did pick the right partner with Identify, someone who had the same vision and had the skill set that we needed. So I would encourage you to make sure you have the right partners to augment any skill sets you don't have as well.
Yeah. One thing too to add to what Lee was saying there with FIS and Fiserv doing some data sharing via our marketplace, it is certainly an option for you to simplify your data pipelines, bringing data in, but it's not the only way, right? We've been moving data for decades now, so there's multiple ways to ingest data into Snowflake. But we're continuing to see an expansion of vendors. I think we have something like 3,000 listings in Snowflake. That can be everything from weather data, things that maybe your data science team might enjoy, but also a lot of financial services companies, folks like Black Knight. If you might be getting data for them for your loan servicing side. There's a lot of other data coming from S&P, Dun & Bradstreet, things of that nature as you're doing risk for your merchants and things of that nature. So it's a good place to look as well. It might simplify your life for ingesting data or bringing in new data sets if you have a data science organization.
That's a great point, Randy. And that's kind of the cherry on top that Marty and we know it's there. We're kind of we're getting there, right?
We have some great things coming up, I think.
Mhm. Yeah, but taking advantage of the marketplace is a huge opportunity.
Yep.
So we have a couple more questions. So Jamie asked, what's the most common mistake companies make during a cloud migration? How could that be avoided? So I'll let either of you guys maybe take a stab at that one.
Common mistake in the cloud migration. Well, I think not having a clear business problem you're trying to solve is because the data sets you think, oh, they have a lot of uses. There's a lot of, in our world, there's a lot of data, a lot of things you can do with the data. So just in mass saying, hey, I'm going to bring all this data over to Snowflake without any idea of a business problem or even a format or structure that you need to have it in will just lead to problems in the future. So understanding clearly what your vision for using it is and the need for it is vital. If you're also the compliance and security is a concern, then that's something you should evaluate ahead of time as well. Make sure that you can meet your regulatory or internal security requirements, which I have every bit of confidence you can. But that's something you need to make sure you need to do ahead of time, because if you're like us, this is the most sensitive data that we have in our environment, and it's sitting out there in the cloud. And one thing keeps me awake at night is making sure this data stays secure. And that's why we did our homework ahead of time. So make sure that it can support what you need.
The other thing too, I'll say is when you're starting to leverage a platform like Snowflake, from the beginning, think about what kind of that longer term vision is there when it comes to setting up, whether that's your role-based access control or even warehouses for visibility. Right, I can't tell you the number of customers who I've seen. They have a Snowflake warehouse that POC warehouse, and now it's running in production because there's no there's no
it's
no longer term solution than a short term fix, right?
A good point.
Really, have some thought when you're going into this, and to what Marty said, right? Really have a business value driver behind what you're trying to accomplish.
Very good point. We've seen that too, Randy.
Yes, we have.
Okay, good. And about 14 minutes left. I think we have time for one or two more questions. So I have a question from Anton. Anton wants to know, how do we deal with data quality challenges? I think just maybe in general, is there an approach? What do we do when we find maybe bad data or poor data quality?
You know what? I think Lee ought to be able to one day answer that more than I I did than I could. I mean, all I can say is, and when I envisioned the system, I knew that we'd have to be able to correct those data anomalies when we found them, and not let them, persist in the environment. So getting ahead of, staying ahead of that before they become part. But they're also, good and well, when you deal with as much data as we do on a daily basis, that those things are going to happen. So one thing we did engineer is a way to back that data out reliably,
Mm-hmm.
right, and then reload data reliably as well. Because I think it's naive to think that once every single day your data is going to be clean, and every single day your data validation is going to be clean, and there aren't going to be anomalies. So being able to identify those early on, being able to back those out and reload data that is reliable in there is key. Now, how you do that, that's why I hired Lee.
And that's why we named the company Identify. We I know that this whole industry is mostly driven by batch files, and though that is okay, and it will probably remain that way for still a decent amount of time, I think there are opportunities to slowly eliminate that in segments of the industry. But you're right, Marty. Our focus is if we can identify really in one, who are the bad actors and who are the maybe not so bad actors. So if we can identify like which sources of data do we consistently have problems with, um, part of our strategic efforts right now as a company is to maybe even go talk to those businesses and see if there's potential of partnering and standardizing things. But you have to solve the problem as it lives too. So we can't expect that every company is going to reship their data or structure their data differently. But that's kind of the world I want to try and create, is some sort of ecosystem where we do work together on cleaning data. I think Snowflake can get us there. That's a big part of why we chose Snowflake too. Randy, I'm curious, do you have any thoughts on the data quality thing as well?
Yeah, I mean, to your point there, Lee, oftentimes it starts with the source, as schemas evolve and change, right? That obviously can impact it. I just heard from one of my other banking customers, I think it was a change in how they were getting data from the Treasury, and it changed from Eastern Standard Time to UTC, right? And that all of a sudden
Oh,
messed up reserve requirements, things of that nature. So that's one aspect, right? It's easy if you can find it at the source. There are some built-in data quality tools within Snowflake as well. But then we're also starting to see quite a few of our partner products out there as well that are helping to drive some of that anomalous behavior and the schema drift that can happen. So we're seeing, it's a mix of kind of the technology and kind of the relationship you have with those data sources. But then the other thing too that I think is important to identify is what are those most pertinent data sources that you have? Kind of similar to what Lee was saying there, so that you can quickly identify, maybe maybe it is a manual process, but hey, these couple data sources, they cannot be wrong. So we need to make sure that we're spending, extra attention there. And this is, maybe not a Snowflake thing, but just a best practice that's out there.
mm-hmm.
And
Agreed.
it's particularly important in our environment because we do have a lot of data sources, hundreds that come in this payment side. And we know full well that a lot of that data is suspect. The data quality on their end is not nearly where it should be. And so
Mm-hmm.
we're having to account for that, we know that the data is not free. So we had to engineer this system to be able to identify that early on, to give us the mechanisms to correct it, reload it, fix it, before it became a problem. So, and again, with Identified Snowflake, we're very helpful in helping us accomplish that.
Absolutely. All right, guys, we have 10 minutes left. I want to be very good on time today for everybody. One last question from Gage. What sort of tools exist in Snowflake that add to the experience beyond warehousing? So beyond warehousing, as an example, Streamlit or app packages. So I might call on Randy first, but would love to hear, what else is out there? What else is useful?
Yeah. I do love the call out for Streamlit there. Whether you're rolling your own Streamlit front end or leveraging Streamlit in Snowflake to develop quick user interfaces for your end users. I think though, and maybe this is, to a degree what we've seen over at Sutton here is on the data engineering side. So whether that's streams and tasks, Snowpipe, leveraging Snowpark to do data transformations, and then also dynamic tables to do continuous transformations as new data comes in. I think what we're seeing is a huge adoption of data engineering on top of Snowflake as kind of this paradigm has switched from ETL to ELT.
Mhm.
Correct. And 100%.
Yeah, Marty, any others? One that comes up a lot. I don't know if either of you guys have an answer for this one. Data lineage. It's a very desired
Yeah.
objective, it seems like this year is data lineage. Just curious if you guys come across is there anything that Snowflake offers, anything on the market that works well with Snowflake?
We
Yeah.
are just beginning on our end, and I'll let Randy go in from the Snowflake side, but we are just beginning to evaluate tools, Snowflake or other vendors to help us on the data lineage side. It's kind of our next evolution of the data validation space, which data governance reports to me too. And our examiner considers data validation, data lineage part of that as well. Now, I'm more of a governance role. Our payments data team is more directly responsible for that. So they're investigating tools to help them from a data lineage perspective. And I think we'll be implementing some of those very, very soon. All I can say is having clean data to start with, having data that's transformed reliably, is going to make this a lot easier. Having to clean it up afterwards, the data lineage tool sounds like a problem I don't want to face.
Actually, it is a new GA feature, the data lineage within Snowflake. So I've had a couple customers already playing around with it with some great feedback. So data within Snowflake, our data lineage features, if you are a Snowflake customer, take a look at it. It's very cool.
Okay.
But yeah, we're seeing a lot of other tools around data lineage, especially from the data cataloging solutions like an Atlan and Alation. So, quite a few options. I would say it also depends on what your ecosystem looks like. If everything's in Snowflake, you can probably use Snowflake native tools and not have to bring in additional, third-party solutions. If you've got multiple data platforms out there, it might be worth taking a look at third-party solutions as well.
Cool. Well, guys, this has been a great conversation today. Randy, Marty, thank you both for your time. For those that dialed in, thank you for attending. Thank you for watching. Hopefully, you can walk away with 5 tips on how to successfully lead a cloud migration. And we will be sending out a recording of this webinar. And you can find it on my LinkedIn and through our newsletter. So thank you all, and cheers, and have a good weekend. Bye, guys.
Thank you very much.